Can you imagine sitting at your own son's wedding, a day that's supposed to be filled with joy and celebration, only for your innocent grandson to lean over and whisper something that shatters your entire world, forcing you to question everything you thought you knew about your family? That's exactly what happened to me. My grandson, little 5-year-old Leo, tugged on my sleeve, his eyes wide and earnest, and told me to look under the table. And what I saw there, well, it was enough to make my stomach drop to my knees and my heart pound like a drum in my chest. Was I wrong for what I did next, for exposing the truth in such a public and undeniable way, or was it the only way to protect my family from a lie that was about to become their reality? Tell me, honestly, if you would have done the same thing. This whole mess started, I suppose, about 2 years ago, when my son, Mark, first introduced us to Sarah. Mark had always been a bit of a free spirit, never really settling down, so when he told us he was serious about Sarah, we were thrilled. My husband, Robert, and I had always hoped to see Mark happy and maybe, eventually, with a family of his own. Sarah was beautiful, no doubt about that. She had a dazzling smile, long blonde hair, and a laugh that could light up a room. She was charming, attentive, and seemed absolutely smitten with Mark. From our perspective, she was everything we could have wanted for our son. She worked as a graphic designer, or so she said, and always spoke about her busy schedule and important projects. She was also incredibly sweet to Leo, Mark's son from a previous, short-lived relationship. Leo's mother, Amy, wasn't really in the picture. She'd moved overseas years ago and rarely contacted him, so Mark had full custody. Leo was our little ray of sunshine, a bright, imaginative boy who absolutely adored his dad. Sarah seemed to embrace him as her own, taking him to the park, reading him stories, and showering him with affection. It warmed my heart to see them together, truly. It felt like our family was finally becoming whole. Mark proposed to Sarah after a whirlwind year and a half. We were all over the moon. The wedding planning began almost immediately, and it was a grand affair. Sarah insisted on a lavish ceremony, a huge guest list, and all the trimmings. Mark, ever the romantic, indulged her every wish. He was so deeply in love, so completely enamored, that he seemed to have stars in his eyes whenever he looked at her. Robert and I, of course, offered to help with the costs, wanting to ensure our son had the wedding of his dreams. We contributed a significant amount, happy to see him so happy. The venue was a beautiful, historic mansion with sprawling gardens, the catering was top-notch, and Sarah's wedding dress was a stunning, custom-made gown that must have cost a fortune. Every detail was meticulously planned, and Sarah seemed to be in her element, orchestrating the entire event with a confident, almost professional air. She often mentioned her event planning experience from previous jobs, which explained her knack for organization. I remember one evening, just a few weeks before the wedding, I was at their house helping to sort through invitations. Sarah was on the phone, animatedly discussing floral arrangements and color palettes. She hung up and sighed, saying, "Oh, this is all so much work, but it's going to be perfect. Every bride deserves her perfect day, right?" I smiled, agreeing wholeheartedly. I truly believed she was a wonderful woman, an ideal partner for my son, and a fantastic stepmother for Leo. But then, little things started to niggle at the back of my mind, small inconsistencies that I initially dismissed as pre-wedding stress or my own overthinking. Sarah was very protective of her phone. She always kept it face down, and if she left the room, she'd take it with her. I'd sometimes catch her quickly minimizing screens if I walked into a room unexpectedly. Again, I told myself it was probably just work stuff, client confidentiality, given her graphic design career. There was also the matter of her family. She rarely spoke about them. She'd mentioned once or twice that her parents lived far away and were elderly, not really able to travel. She had a sister, too, but they weren't close. It seemed a little odd, given how important family was to Mark and to us, but I didn't press. People have complicated family dynamics, and I respected her privacy. Robert, my husband, also noticed a few things. He's more observant than I am, a bit of a natural skeptic. He mentioned once that he'd never actually seen any of Sarah's graphic design work, despite her talking about it constantly. He'd playfully asked her to show him some of her portfolio, and she'd always brushed it off with a laugh, saying it was all proprietary or still in development. He didn't think much of it at the time, but it planted a tiny seed of doubt in my mind. Still, love is blind, isn't it? Especially when it's your son's love. We were so invested in their happiness, so eager for this wedding to be a dream come true, that we overlooked these subtle red flags. We were caught up in the excitement, the preparations, the joy of a future that seemed so bright. We were planning a family cruise for after the wedding, a big trip to celebrate their new life together. Everything felt perfect. The wedding day arrived, a beautiful, sun-drenched Saturday in late spring. The mansion looked stunning, adorned with flowers and ribbons. Guests were arriving, elegantly dressed, chatting and laughing. Mark, my handsome son, looked incredibly dapper in his suit, a nervous but happy smile on his face. Sarah was breathtaking in her white gown, radiating happiness as she walked down the aisle. The ceremony was lovely, full of heartfelt vows and promises. Robert and I watched, tears welling in our eyes, so proud of our son and so happy for the life he was building. After the ceremony, it was time for the reception. We were seated at the head table, alongside the newlyweds, the best man, and the maid of honor. Little Leo was seated next to me, looking adorable in his tiny suit, fidgeting a little but mostly mesmerized by all the activity. The music was playing, people were dancing, and the champagne was flowing. It was truly a magical atmosphere, exactly what Sarah had envisioned. As the evening progressed, Mark and Sarah were circulating, greeting guests, laughing, and enjoying their special day. Leo, bless his heart, had eaten a little too much wedding cake and was starting to get sleepy. He was leaning against me, his head on my shoulder, when suddenly he sat up straight. His eyes, usually full of childish wonder, were now wide with a strange mix of confusion and a hint of fear. He gently tugged on my arm, pulling me closer. "Grandma," he whispered, his voice barely audible above the din of the reception. "Look under the table." My heart gave a little lurch. Kids say the darndest things, but there was something in his tone, an urgency, that made me pay attention. I glanced at him, then at the other guests, then slowly, cautiously, I bent down, pretending to adjust my shoe. And there, tucked away discreetly beneath the pristine white tablecloth, was a small, elegant black clutch bag. It wasn't Sarah's. I knew Sarah's clutch. It was a sparkly silver one she'd been carrying all day. This one was different. My eyes widened as I saw something else peeking out from the opening of the bag. A stack of crisp, $100 bills. And next to them, a small, black, rather expensive-looking digital recorder. My breath hitched in my throat. What was a digital recorder doing here? And why was it hidden? A cold knot formed in my stomach. My mind raced, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. My heart pounded so hard I thought everyone at the table could hear it. I straightened up slowly, my face, I'm sure, a mask of forced calm. I tried to catch Robert's eye, but he was deep in conversation with a cousin. Leo was still looking at me, his innocent eyes asking a silent question. I gave him a reassuring squeeze, trying to convey that it was okay, even though my own mind was reeling. So that's the situation I was in, right there, in the middle of my son's wedding, with this bewildering discovery under the table. And I had to make a choice. Before I tell you what happened next, I want you to pause and comment below what you would have done in my shoes. Would you have ignored it, thinking it was a misunderstanding? Would you have confronted Sarah immediately, risking a scene? Or would you have investigated further, trying to find out what was truly going on? I really want to know your honest thoughts. My first instinct was to panic, to grab the bag and demand answers. But a small, cautious voice in my head told me to be smart, to be discreet. This was Mark's wedding, after all. I didn't want to ruin his special day unless it was absolutely necessary. I waited for a moment when Mark and Sarah were on the dance floor, twirling happily. Then, with a practiced subtlety, I leaned down again, this time reaching for the clutch. My fingers brushed against the smooth leather. I carefully, very carefully, pulled it closer. The recorder was still there, the red light on its small screen faintly blinking, indicating it was recording. My blood ran cold. My hands trembled slightly as I managed to get a grip on the recorder. It was small, sleek, and clearly designed for covert use. I pressed the stop button, hoping to save whatever had already been recorded. My mind was racing, trying to put the pieces together. Was this a prank? Blackmail? What possible reason would Sarah have to record conversations at her own wedding and hide the recorder like this? And the money, why so much cash? I quickly slipped the recorder into my own purse, making sure no one saw me. I replaced the clutch exactly where I found it, trying to make it look untouched. My heart was thumping so loudly I felt sure it was audible. I had to know what was on that recorder. I had to understand what this meant. I excused myself from the table, telling Robert the first needed to freshen up. I practically ran to the ladies' room, my hands shaking as I fumbled with the tiny device. I found a quiet stall, locked myself in, and pressed play. The first few minutes were muffled, indistinct chatter from the reception hall. Then, the voices became clearer. Sarah's voice. And another woman's voice, one I didn't recognize. "Are you sure about this, Sarah?" the unfamiliar voice asked, sounding nervous. "Relax, Brenda," Sarah replied, her voice low and tight, completely devoid of the usual sweetness I associated with her. "It's all going according to plan. This old fool, Mark, is completely smitten. He thinks I'm his princess." There was a harsh, cynical laugh. "The prenup is signed, the wedding's almost over, and soon I'll have access to all his money. His parents are loaded, you know. And that house of his, it's practically a mansion. The divorce settlement alone will set me up for life." My stomach lurched. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. It felt like a punch to the gut, a betrayal so profound it made me dizzy. I leaned against the cold wall of the stall, desperately trying to steady myself. I listened further, my ears straining to catch every word. "What about the kid?" Brenda asked. "Leo. Won't he complicate things?" "Please," Sarah scoffed. "He's just an innocent pawn. The sweet stepmom act was essential, obviously. Makes Mark trust me more. But once I have what I want, he's not my problem. His real mom is out of the picture, so he'll just be Mark's burden. I'm not signing up for stepmom duties long term, trust me. I have plans, big plans. A luxury apartment, designer clothes, endless shopping trips, all paid for by Mark's family fortune. This recorder? It's just in case. Proof that I was forced into things, that I was threatened into signing a weak prenup, or whatever else I need to invent to maximize my payout. I've done this before, you know. I'm practically a professional at getting settlements. This one's going to be my biggest score yet." The blood drained from my face. I felt cold, numb. This wasn't my Sarah. This wasn't the woman who had charmed us all, who had promised to love my son and care for my grandson. This was a calculating, cruel con artist, and she had just married my son. My entire world tilted on its axis. The pieces of the puzzle, the inconsistencies, the guarded phone, the vague family stories, Robert's observations about her work, they all clicked into place with horrifying clarity. This wasn't just about Mark losing money. It was about his heart being broken, about Leo being used and discarded, about our entire family being duped and exploited. The rage that simmered within me was unlike anything I had ever felt. It was a cold, furious anger that demanded action. I couldn't let her get away with this. Not on my watch. Not to my family. I stumbled out of the ladies' room, the recorder clutched in my hand. My mind was a whirlwind of emotions, shock, disbelief, fury, and a fierce, protective love for my son and grandson. I knew I couldn't just keep this to myself. I had to expose her, right here, right now, before she could do any more damage. The thought of confronting her privately crossed my mind for a fleeting second, but then I remembered her words. "I've done this before, a professional at getting settlements." She would deny everything, turn it around, twist the narrative. She needed to be exposed publicly, undeniably. There was no other way. I walked back into the reception hall, my eyes scanning the crowd. I saw Mark and Sarah slow dancing, their faces close, a picture of marital bliss. It made my stomach churn. I spotted Robert and pulled him aside, my voice a strained whisper as I explained what I had heard. He looked at me, his eyes wide with horror, then a slow, burning anger. "We have to stop this," he said, his voice grim. We walked over to the DJ booth. I knew what I had to do, and there was no turning back. I leaned over to the DJ, a young man who looked slightly bewildered by my intense expression. "I need you to play something for everyone," I said, my voice trembling but firm. "It's a message from the bride." Before he could question me, I pulled out the small recorder. "Just connect this to your sound system. Please. It's urgent." The DJ, seeing the urgency in my eyes, hesitated for a moment, then nodded. He took the recorder, connected it to the massive speakers, and dimmed the lights, thinking it was some kind of surprise dedication from the bride. A hush fell over the room as the music slowly faded out. All eyes turned to the dance floor, where Mark and Sarah had just paused, looking confused. Then, the muffled sounds of the recorder filled the hall. Slowly, agonizingly, the voices became clear. Sarah's voice. And Brenda's. The guests looked at each other, murmuring, trying to understand. Mark turned to me, his brow furrowed with concern. Then, Sarah's cynical laugh pierced the quiet. This old fool, Mark, is completely smitten. He thinks I'm his princess. A collective gasp rippled through the room. Mark's face went white. Sarah's eyes, which had been sparkling with happiness just moments before, now darted around the room, her expression turning from confusion to utter panic. She looked at me, her eyes blazing with hatred. The prenup is signed, the wedding's almost over, and soon I'll have access to all his money. His parents are loaded, you know. And that house of his, it's practically a mansion. The divorce settlement alone will set me up for life. The words, clear and damning, echoed through the grand hall. Guests gasped again, some started whispering loudly, others looked at Mark with profound sympathy. Mark stood there, frozen, his face a mask of disbelief and pain. Sarah was now shaking, her beautiful white dress seeming to mock the ugliness of her words. She tried to make a run for it, but Robert, quicker than I thought he could be, stepped in front of her, blocking her path. What about the kid? Won't he complicate things? Brenda's voice continued. Sarah's cold, dismissive answer followed. Please. He's just an innocent pawn. But once I have what I want, he's not my problem. Little Leo, who had been sitting quietly at our table, looked up, his innocent face contorted in confusion and hurt. I quickly scooped him up, pulling him close, shielding him from the full impact of his supposed stepmother's cruel words. The recording played on, Sarah boasting about being a professional at getting settlements, her big plans for Mark's money. By the time the recording finished, the entire hall was in stunned silence. You could have heard a pin drop. Sarah, utterly exposed, stood there trembling, her carefully constructed facade completely shattered. Mark, his face etched with betrayal, stared at her, his eyes filled with a pain that tore at my heart. Is that true, Sarah? He whispered, his voice cracking. She didn't answer. She couldn't. Her silence was louder than any confession. A few minutes later, the police, who had been called by a quick-thinking guest, arrived. Sarah was escorted out of the mansion, her wedding dress now a symbol of her deception, not her love. The wedding, of course, was over. What started as a joyous celebration ended in utter devastation. The aftermath was difficult, to say the least. Mark was heartbroken, utterly shattered by Sarah's betrayal. It took him a long time to come to terms with the fact that the woman he loved, the woman he had just married, was a con artist. We rallied around him, Robert and I, and our extended family. We reminded him that it wasn't his fault, that he was a victim of a manipulative scheme. The marriage was quickly annulled, thankfully, given the clear evidence of fraud. Sarah faced legal consequences for her actions, as it turned out she had a history of similar schemes, as her friend Brenda later confessed to the authorities. The money found in her clutch, along with other assets she had acquired through deceit, was eventually used as restitution. Mark, though wounded, slowly began to heal. He focused on his work and, most importantly, on Leo. The experience made him more protective of his son, and he became even more dedicated to being a good father. Leo, thankfully, was young enough that the full impact of Sarah's words didn't quite sink in. We explained it to him as best we could, telling him that Sarah was a bad person who had lied, and that his daddy loved him very much. He was confused for a while, but with time and our constant love and reassurance, he recovered. He eventually forgot about Auntie Sarah, as he used to call her. My grandson, my sweet Leo, was the true hero of that day. His innocent observation, his quiet whisper, saved my son from a lifetime of misery and financial ruin. He saw something, knew it wasn't right, and came to me. It makes me wonder what other small truths children see that we, as adults, often overlook. That day taught me a profound lesson about trusting my instincts and about the unwavering power of a mother's love. It taught me that sometimes, the most shocking truths are hidden right under our noses, and it takes an unexpected moment, or an innocent child, to reveal them. It was the most terrible day, but also, in a strange way, the day we saved our family from a much greater tragedy. If you found yourself shaking your head in disbelief as you listened to this story, please like this video. If you believe I did the right thing by exposing Sarah the way I did, subscribe for more stories like this. And most importantly, share your final thoughts on this whole mess in the comments section below. What would you have done? Have you ever had a moment where an innocent child revealed a shocking truth? I'm truly interested to hear your perspectives.
I'll see you all in the next story.